Hello, world singers. My name is Brooke.
And I'm Tyler.
And this is Cosmere Conversations.
Hello, everyone. We are beyond excited to announce a really incredible guest today for everyone. We are joined by the Queen of Dragonsteel, Chief Operating Officer Emily Sanderson herself. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast, Emily.
My pleasure. Glad to be here.
It is more than a dream come true.
Tyler's like literally speechless. He's like, what do I say?
I've lost it. I've recorded 200 plus hours of this podcast. I do nonstop talking with my wife about the Cosmere. And right now I can barely get words out. It is.
Well, I'm flattered.
I will say this has been his dream for a long time. For years, obviously, people will ask, oh, do you want to get Brandon Sanderson on the podcast? And Tyler's always like, you know who we really want? Emily.
I know all the good stuff.
Exactly.
So. And I recognize that. And I was just like, Brandon, he's easy money. That man talks, he writes, he's out there. He's doing the performances up on stage at Dragonsteel. The real mastermind is the one that I want to talk to. And so it is wonderful to be with you here. We really wanted to get your insight on the Lightweaver Foundation, which is the charity organization that you and Brandon started, as well as just talk a little bit more about Dragonsteel as a business and kind of how it operates. Normally, we're kind of all about the lore and the stories here on the podcast, but I think everybody's going to allow us to put that aside for today and focus more on some of the real world stuff that goes on and how the company has developed over time. If you don't mind, just in the means of saving some time, I have a very short summary of the quick history of Dragonsteel as a company. You're welcome to correct anything that I get wrong, but I basically just want to kind of bring us up to the present a little bit without kind of going through the whole history of Dragonsteel, because
that's why, because we could be here for hours and hours.
Exactly. Last year, actually in April, you and Brandon sat down on an intentionally blank episode and did kind of talk about the history of Dragonsteel. So anybody who is interested in some more of those details, I'll put a link to that episode in the show notes. But very quickly, Dragonsteel was founded in 2007. It was when the LLC was first created. And for several years in what I think you called Era 1, and you might have broken kind of the different time periods up into those eras, you were operating, you and Brandon kind of out of your garage. He had a entrepreneurial idea of buying some of the back catalog or the overprinted versions of his book and the hardcovers and then selling those to fans. And so you were doing that for a couple of years and you began to kind of take more responsibility of the finances and kind of the taxes and how everything was organized. And it's also when you guys started to bring on, first in an assistant role, some of the names that have become really well known and are now key members of the Dragonsteel team. But there's Peter, Kara Stewart, Isaac, and Adam kind of all came on in that first era.
That's pretty early.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, it's interesting because technically the first employee was Becky, who is my sister, and she would ship the books that, the 5 orders that Brandon would get over the week of signed books, and she would come and get them and ship them. And then when we brought Kara on with her store expertise, Becky had young kids at the time, and so she kind of took a break and she came back in the role of Brandon's and my executive assistant a couple of years ago. So she's kind of technically the longest employee, although she had a hiatus in the middle there, but and she was part-time then and she's full-time now. So we got Becky, and then in 2008, Peter 2009, Kara and Isaac 2013, Adam 2014, and then it just goes crazy from there. So
Yeah, exactly. I think you talked about how that kind of 2014, 2015 was maybe the transition from era one to era two.
Mhm.
Brandon was caught up with a little bit of maybe fear about that Amazon and the publishing industry kind of like battling over how things are handled on that front. And he wanted more control over
Yeah.
everything that you guys were doing. And then in 2015, there was the Elantris Leatherbound. And that kind of
Mhm.
like started to set you up on that path of Dragonsteel Books producing the Leatherbounds, which, as you said on the podcast, gave you a real business income, really for like the first time, and kind of like started to bring in, legitimate sources of money that you could also plan out and be like, okay, well, if we do this 10 years after each book is published, then we can start expecting. And at the same time, Brandon's audience is growing, and it's kind of like expanding into the fandom. But that era two kind of goes up until I would say the year of Sanderson in 2023.
Mhm.
And
Yep.
that's when things kind of launched again or took another.
Really exploded.
Yeah.
And you guys had
Yeah.
the most successful Kickstarter of all time. And then, maybe we'll do a little bit of speculation about the far future era 4 of Dragonsteel.
The space age of Dragonsteel.
Yes, exactly. But I think that kind of just like provides a quick history of the company. And I guess we're kind of mainly interested in how everything fits into that post year of Sanderson timeline and like what's going on currently. And so like, could you just tell us maybe which of those eras of Dragonsteel was filled with the most challenges, or which ones kind of like looking back do you see as the ones that it was really important to start getting things right?
That's a really good question. I think this era since 2023 really is when it feels more like our choices have a harder consequence. And obviously, because more people are affected by our choices with the business.
Yeah.
Not that our choices didn't matter in the past, but we always kind of joke and we're like, we're a real company now. And in some ways, when we were smaller, it didn't feel that way. It was like a bunch of friends just, hanging out and doing what they loved. And we've kind of had to grow up a little bit in the last couple of years. And we knew it was coming. We didn't just realize it would be quite so fast. The Kickstarter kind of kickstarted our business. But it's been hard to deal with, but also kind of a fun challenge in a way. You do something one way for so long, and it's fun to try something else and see what's going to happen if we do things this way. And so we've had to be a little bit more bureaucratic, a little bit more professional, which has been both good and bad.
Yeah.
I think our employees who have been with us that long would say the same kind of thing, that there are things they miss from the good old days, but there are also things that are a lot more exciting and feel a lot more stable in some ways now.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I work for a company that I see a lot of similarities in the company I work for, and Dragonsteel both like originally started by kind of independent creators that over time have grown quite large, and there is a lot of really unique kind of hurdles and navigation that has to be done in those growing pains. And Dragonsteel, I think, is just such a unique company. I don't know that there's really anything else like it that is like offering the books, the special edition books, and the awesome merchandise for like these books that we love so much. I feel so spoiled as a fan that we get like such cool stuff that's like feels like it's made, by fans for fans.
It is.
Yeah,
Really, we make what we want to have as fans, and we make the kind of books that we want on our shelves. So
yeah.
that's the fun part of it, is we're all pretty invested, if you'll pardon the pun.
Any like specific challenges or things that have been really rewarding about this process of kind of transforming from being more book focused to expanding to other types of merch items? For example, I know like plushies in particular tend to have kind of a complicated merch timeline or like a really long merge timeline. So anything like that that's sort of like been a learning curve or just an interesting thing that you've learned in this process?
I think honestly, the biggest learning curve was figuring out communication among the different departments and the different people. Because when there were 10 of us, then it was easier to just have informal communication be the standard and have things get done. And the bigger we got and the more complicated our projects got, the harder it was to make sure that everybody was on the same page and we weren't, duplicating efforts and getting in each other's way. And one of the things we did some leadership training. We did, I don't know if you're familiar with Brene Brown.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
She wrote Dare to Lead, and I read that and really loved that book. I looked at a bunch of different kind of business leadership, things, and none of them really seemed to fit because we're not really business people. We're nerds.
Yeah.
And words are a lot more important than jargon. And Brene Brown really seemed to resonate, especially because her leadership style is the idea that everyone is a leader, and you teach everyone how to have these good communication skills. And so we did some formal training with everyone and had a certified instructor come in, and we went through Brene Brown's Dare to Lead program. And that was good because it gave us kind of a shared vocabulary.
Yeah.
And some tools. And I think that helped a lot to get everybody on the same page and kind of all together figuring out what do we actually want to do with this company? What's the point of having here and what are we trying to accomplish? So that was really helpful.
Of course.
Yeah. And I think the thing that I felt most successful about is that we turned our small company into a bigger company, and everybody really stepped up. Like if you're used to being, and it wasn't easy, if you're used to being the only one, in your department doing editorial or art or whatever, you're coming up with the ideas and also, making the ideas happen. It's hard to have other people become involved and try and manage people and all of those things. And our team really stepped up and learned new things and tried new things and worked together. And so that was really fun to watch.
Yeah.
Because it could have fallen apart at any point. It's still who knows. But,
well, I'm sure everyone has great leaders to lead the way, but your background, as far as I know, is not really in business, right? You started as an English teacher, so you also do you want to talk about what it was like to go from being a teacher to being a COO of a company?
Well, there are striking similarities between junior high kids and adult employees. There's some things that work for both situations. But for me, it was, I had to learn a little bit at a time. And I was involved in the business from the very beginning. I quit when I was pregnant with our first son, who is now turning 18. And then started helping Brandon with the business. But for a long time, I was doing it part-time, and I was doing a lot more behind the scenes. And so I was kind of giving myself my own business education all the way along. Like I've read so many business books and, done so many classes and conferences and things. But it was really when we did this Dare to Lead that I realized I needed to kind of step up and be more visible. Partly for me, it's hard in the background all the time of something successful. You want to be like, hey, look at me, I'm cool too,
Yeah.
And partly for me, but also for, I couldn't identify myself as a teacher when I hadn't done it for, I taught for 7 years, but it's been 18 years ago,
Yeah.
And I don't know, anyone who is a career teacher knows that that's not something you grow out of. You are a teacher, or you're not. And I still really identify with that kind of mindset, but I was identifying myself as a has-been,
Yeah.
I had to be like, no, I'm not a has-been teacher. I'm a current business owner, and that's part of my identity and part of who I am. And I'm not really a center of attention kind of person. I like to be in control, don't get me wrong. But like behind the scenes, weaving all the things. And I had to get a little bit more comfortable with being out in front and I also felt it was important because women in business need to see other women in business.
Yeah.
It makes a difference, I think, when you have a at least not gender imbalanced company. I think it makes a
Yeah.
difference when you have people working together. And and Brandon's always been very good about letting me be in the spotlight as much as I was comfortable with and sharing the spotlight.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
But it was kind of me deciding I need to not identify myself as a has-been teacher. I'm still using the same skills and the same interests and all of that, but I'm doing something else with them.
Yeah.
And so that was an interesting switch. I
Yeah.
Yeah,
actually,
of course.
the instructor that taught our Dare to Lead course became my business coach because that's part of her business that she does. So I've been working with a business coach for the last couple of years, and that was really helpful. Sometimes everybody I think deals with imposter syndrome to one degree or another, but feeling like, oh, I can't be a business owner because I don't have an MBA and all of these other things, and being like, no, I've been doing this for almost 20 years, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and you're doing it well because that kind of transition from a really small, out of your garage, husband and wife kind of team with maybe a couple friends. And then now you have, I think, 54, 55 employees.
I think we're at 61 right now.
61. Okay, so yeah, you're
62. Yeah.
always expanding, and that next stage up is definitely a thing that a lot of people they try. They have a good business idea, they have great plans, they make money, but then the company doesn't come together for any number of huge reasons. But I
Mhm.
think that you're talking about being a teacher all the time. That was also my job for 7 years out
So
of
you get it.
university. I do. And it was just like, we were just playing the Cosmere RPG the other day. And
Mm.
I realized I dropped right back into teacher mode. And I was just like going through, okay, no, we're going to click this button and then this is going to do. And it really doesn't go away easily. But I think that, applying those skills and like that skill set to these different facets of your life and your business is paying dividends. Obviously, it's working out. And I would love to kind of get a better understanding of you had mentioned that you like to be in the background, you occasionally like spotlight, and you also want control, which reminded me, I got so starstruck at the beginning that I completely forgot to ask the question that we start.
I thought you
Oh,
were skipping them for time. I was like, okay, I guess he doesn't want to do
No,
that.
I forgot. But could you let everybody know who your favorite character in the Cosmere is?
Hoyd. And I both love him and hate him. Like many, I think.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. He's a man of
Polarizing.
yes,
He is
polarizing
very
opinions.
polarizing. But one of the things that's interesting to me about him is that he's kind of got a finger in all the pies,
Yeah.
And I feel like he's a lot more altruistic than he lets people believe. Like he really
Hmm.
wants things to turn out okay. And I think he really cares about people, but he's kind of like, no, it's all for me and I'm in it for I don't know what he says. Sometimes he says he's in it for the glory or
Hmm.
just for entertainment or whatever.
Yeah.
He's just an interesting character to me because of that kind of different facets of his personality. He's
Absolutely.
so when he's helping Shalon understand her childhood, then he's just so sweet and comforting, and then other times he's just horrible, and um,
Yeah, and
Yeah, the moment when Shalon like runs up and hugs him and
yeah,
Kaladin, I think it's Kaladin who's like, why would you hug him? Like,
what are you talking about?
yeah.
Yeah.
and then he has other moments when he tells Dalinar, he's like, I like you a lot, but don't mistake me. I will watch your world burn if it gets me what I want. It's like, that's a huge
Yeah.
Big
difference.
difference.
But I just, yeah, I found what you were saying there is like, you like having a little bit of behind the scenes action and kind of like being involved in a lot of aspects, Hoyd-esque in some ways.
I hope I'm not as
Not
much of a jerk as Hoyt is.
I don't think you're anywhere near as polarizing.
But could you maybe just like quickly describe what that means for you as the COO? What
Hmm.
are like your responsibilities for Dragonsteel right now?
COO kind of as we define it, I like to say that my job is to make sure that everybody else has what they need to do their job.
Mm-hmm.
So whether it's facilities, whether it's equipment, whether it's training, whether it's, benefits, whether it's whatever they need to be able to do their job well. And that's kind of what in most organizations, you kind of have separate departments, but HR and benefits is all within operations in our company, and facilities and all that kind of stuff. Finances to some extent, although I'm not the best financial mind. Luckily, we have people who are, but at least overseeing that and making sure that things make sense. And to me, that's rewarding. Like you've got somebody with really good talent and really good ideas, and you can kind of facilitate it so that they can do something cool. And you have people that you bring them together, and then together they come up with something that's better than anything either of them could do on their own. And that's really exciting to me. So I do a lot of meetings, a lot of saying yes or no, mostly no, but we've got a lot of dreamers.
Yeah.
Calm down, guys. Come on, slow down. It's okay.
Well, and maybe at the top of that dreamer list is Brandon.
Absolutely.
And I think that was on display recently. The Dragonsteel team went to Spain for Celsius 232, and that represented a whole new set of challenges and logistical issues. So I believe it was pretty successful. Your social media made it seem like you guys were having fun.
We had a great time, and we're all still alive.
Exactly.
And we didn't go bankrupt. So
could you
win all around?
Could you talk a little bit about the logistical challenges of, taking something that is based in Utah, like you have physical material and people live there, and then moving that internationally?
Yeah, it was a big challenge. And we did it kind of as an experiment because we want to be able to get merchandise and books and things to our fans in other parts of the world. And shipping oftentimes is just incredibly prohibitive.
Of course.
Shipping and tariffs and everything else.
Yeah.
And we have a really good fan base in Spain. I speak Spanish. I spent a summer in Madrid when I was a Spanish teacher, and Brandon and I have been to Spain a few times. So it was kind of a good place for an experiment. Also, Celsius 232, the organizers of that convention are just great guys, and were willing to work with us and do things maybe a little different than would have been normal. But having to get we took our booth with us, this booth that we've had made that we've brought with us to conventions. So we put all of our booth and all of our merchandise in a big old shipping container, and we had to get it all ready and send it back in May. So it'd be there by July. And that was a lot of work.
Oh my gosh, that sounds stressful. Were you worried it wouldn't get there, or like it wouldn't get there on time? I'm like stressed
we
just
were
thinking about it
the whole day. And when it showed up, finally, the whole company was like, yay.
Yeah.
So, it was a team effort. There were, our events team had people specifically figuring out how do we, what do you do with how do you import merchandise, and how do you get all of the forms filled out so that you can sell it legally, and how do you make sure you get it all back, and it was a lot of work. We actually luckily found some partners that helped out. There's a group called the World Trade Center of Utah who helps Utah businesses go international.
Oh, wow.
And and they helped a ton, because it's hard even to know what questions to ask.
Oh my gosh,
Right.
yeah.
When you're doing something for the first time. So finding people like that and getting a third-party logistics partner that could, be in Spain and receive the merchandise and all of that. And then, my team is amazing as far as setting up a store, running lines, running signings. They make it look easy, but getting everything there and getting it all set up was a big task. But it was also a lot of fun. I think, everybody, they're like, oh, I want to travel. I want to go, me, and I'm like, you want to gluttons for punishment, you want to work 12-hour days and be on your feet and, miss lunch. But they had a good time, and they were smiling, happy, and just really enjoying the fans, enjoying the books.
Yeah.
So it was cool.
I'm curious, of the 61 employees you had, how many did travel international with you?
We had total, all of us, with Brandon and I included, I think we had 24.
Okay.
Okay.
That's huge. I mean, that's,
It was crazy.
Just moving 24 people from point A to point B would be enough, but you're also doing the whole booth, and this is a booth and elements that we have seen at Dragonsteel Nexus. But I imagine that that's been loaded up and is now somewhere in transit back to the United States because it needs to be at Nexus in December,
Yes.
right?
Oh my
Yeah,
gosh.
exactly. Yeah,
Stress
so
all over again.
mhm. And we actually, it's nice because we have two booths now.
Okay.
We have a big one that is fancier, and we have a smaller one that's kind of, it's actually really cool. It has books and it kind of folds together. So you can load
Ooh.
it up with books and then fold it together kind of like a cupboard and then unfold it when you're ready. And so we took the smaller booth. Some of my employees joke and call one the Kolos booth and other the Condra booth, you know.
That's great.
And perfect, because you want it to be able to just fold up nice and
Yeah.
tight and then expand out and become what you need in the spots
Mhm.
that you need it.
I feel like
Yeah.
this is a perfect example, though, of how Dragonsteel seems to always be kind of looking for the next, maybe challenge, but maybe just the next like thing to do. It's continually evolving and changing. And I think this goes really nicely into the next point that Tyler, I think you put here in this notes.
When I had a full
The
quote.
quote, yeah, the quote from Adolin.
So I have been saying this to people all the time, whether it's someone asking about Dragonsteel Nexus. And now that you're here, I'm just going to ask you directly.
Yeah.
I think this quote from Wind and Truth, based on what I've seen, is like an ideal or a tenet of Dragonsteel, the company.
Mhm.
And so I'm going to read the quote because it wouldn't be this podcast if we didn't at least have a single
Right, you
quote
gotta
read.
have some quotes.
So we have from Adolin in Wind and Truth, quote, "The commandant's strategy didn't work, but when it didn't, he and his armies quickly reassessed. They fell into the next best plan and held. A well-executed pivot like that is one of the single best hallmarks of a disciplined and well-trained military." End quote. Now, while you are not a military, would you say that that quote is kind of like Brandon writing about Dragonsteel, the company?
Absolutely. Like we talk a lot about pivoting and, you know, trying to the difference between being stable and being nimble and, you know, all of these things. And part of it is, I think, getting people who are dedicated and who are enjoying themselves, that, you know, they're not in it for just the money.
Hmm.
Obviously, we have to pay people so that they can live, but you know, that's not what's exciting to them about it. And they're passionate about it. They're dedicated and they feel, you know, feel a sense of accomplishment for what they do and helping people enjoy the books and learn from the books. It's interesting to me because when Brandon and I first were dating, and you know, I was a teacher and I felt like I have a noble calling educating the youth, and you know, he's in entertainment. That's, you know, not that cool. But the more I'd been a reader all my life. You know, I knew what books meant to me, but talking to fans and seeing the difference that Brandon's books had made in the lives of so many people, I was like, this is not just entertainment. Like this is important. You know, it's important work, and it can reach people that other types of things might not, you know, and so many people who have been changed by it. And I think our employees feel the same thing. We try to share stories that go along. Now it's harder to do, but we'll put, you know, something that came up in the fan mail, we'll put it in a weekly update and to our internal, so people know, yeah, the stuff you're doing makes a difference to other people, even if it's just entertainment, you know.
Yeah.
So that's part of it, is being passionate about what you're doing and also trying to stay trying to be able to pivot well.
Yeah. I think that's a great kind of segue to talk about the Lightweaver Foundation. Actually, I want to make sure we get that in because I'm really excited to talk about this.
Mm-hmm.
Because part of what the Lightweaver Foundation does is promote literacy. That's one of the kind of arms of the organization, bringing books, stories to everyone. And I'll just give kind of a quick rundown of like what Lightweaver Foundation is for any listeners who may not be familiar with it. It is a 501c3 nonprofit that works with other organizations to provide basic needs like food, water, shelter, clothing, as well as feeding the mind, as we said, through literacy and education. The mission is, quote, feed bodies, fill minds, and fuel hope, end quote. And right now, the current focus is on three organizations. One is the School Zone program through Primary Children's Hospital, which helps hospitalized kids stay connected to their education. There's Operation Literacy, which provides resources and mentorships to individuals of all ages who are seeking to improve their literacy skills. So important. And then Lifting Hands International, which provides basic supplies, shelter, education, skill building resources to refugees around the world. And I think another really important aspect of this foundation that I learned when I was doing research for this episode is that all of the administrative costs of the Lightweaver Foundation are covered by yourself, Emily, and Brandon, which is incredible. That means that everything that people donate to the organization is actually going directly to those causes that the foundation supports, which is awesome. Do you want to talk a little bit about like how this came about, how y'all went about starting this foundation?
Yeah, it's interesting because the Lightweaver Foundation is in a bit of a transition. You know, as Dragonsteel grows, Lightweaver kind of has to grow as well. And it started out as it's a private foundation that just is mine and Brandon's. And we set it up so that we could do fundraising, but that wasn't the primary focus at first. It was Brandon and I feeling like we have a lot and so many people don't. And we want to do something, even if sometimes it seems like a drop in the bucket, you know, with all the needs that are out there, but we want to be able to do something. And so we were using our own funds and trying to find causes and organizations that we could vet, that we knew where the aid was making it to the people who needed it and not someone's pockets, which is always difficult. And we set it up. We wanted to do one international cause and one local just to our community cause, and then make sure there was something that was hands-on, that we were not just giving money for, but they were actually helping, you know, because I think that makes a difference. And try to have our kids be involved as well, because it's important for them to know what entitled brats they are. I served as a missionary for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in Bolivia in 1996 to 1998. And I saw a lot of poverty and a lot of you would see these markets where they were selling secondhand clothes from America. And I was like, I bet you those were donated, not meant to be sold. But, you know, that's kind of how it goes. And so trying to find something where, like Lifting Hands International, we made sure that they were an organization we could trust. And, you know, like we filled up a shipping container with all of our employees at Dragonsteel and had it sent to Ukraine. And they showed us a video of them opening our container and giving it to people. And, you know, that's powerful. So that's part of that. And then we found that people would see what we were doing and want to be involved. And so we're like, okay, you know, all of the sites, all of the causes on our website, people can donate to directly. And in fact, we encourage that, you know, it doesn't have to come through us. But one of the things we found that we could do that maybe others might not be able to do was shine a light on things. You know, Brandon has a platform.
Right.
And a lot of these organizations have been really grateful to work with us because it gets their message out there. And that's been kind of fun to spotlight things that we've found, people that we've worked with who are doing really good things all around the world. And, you know, say, hey, everybody, look at this, you know.
And I think
help out.
Just in talking with like our listeners and our patrons, we mentioned to our patrons that we were going to do this interview about the Lightweaver Foundation, and people were really interested. And I think there's also an aspect of people wanting to give back. And like you said, you really have to vet who you're giving to, and like, is that really helping? Like, where is that going? And so being able to go to the Lightweaver Foundation and know like, okay, these organizations have been vetted, I know that my donation is really going to go to the people who need it, is great. That's such a great like service to people who are looking for a place to donate and may just not know or not have the time to do all of that vetting.
Oh, and there's so many good causes out there. Spread the love a little bit and work with different people in different places. But we have some that we go back to again and again because they're just doing things that we feel strongly about. So it's been really fun.
Yeah. And if you don't mind, I'd love to bring in one of those patron questions from our friend Audrey, who specifically said that had noticed that the Lightweaver Foundation had worked with incarcerated populations, which is what they do for their professional work.
Mm-hmm.
And they would love to learn more about the experiences of the Lightweaver Foundation working with prisons. Is that part of encouraging creative writing and literacy? And kind of what specifically has the foundation done for those populations?
Yeah, it's interesting because for reasons you can probably figure out, Brandon's books have been popular among incarcerated populations for years and years. In fact, years ago, inmates didn't have access to email. They had to write physical letters. And fairly often we would get physical letters in the mail with someone talking about, I resonated with Kaladin being a slave and, and I'm trying to do better and all kinds of different things. And that kind of led to Lightweaver Foundation donating Brandon's books to our local prisons. And we would just go do a book drop every once in a while. And then we got involved with an organization called My Story Matters. And they have a curriculum that they've created and that they work with inmates in the prisons here, local prisons here in Utah. And their program has been adopted by other prisons over the country as well. But their program is basically kind of based on the idea of the hero's journey. Joseph Campbell, is a man with a
the
thousand faces.
classic.
Yeah. And going through that process, but doing it through writing your story and becoming the hero of your own story rather than the villain of your own story. And the more we worked with Amy Chandler and her team, the more we saw the amazing things they were doing with this curriculum and this program. And they have volunteers that go in and teach classes. And, and oftentimes we'll hear about inmates that are fans of Brandon's books. And so we had an opportunity a couple of months ago, Brandon and I and some of Brandon's publicity team and Jane, who's Brandon's sister, but she's also one of our co-directors of the Lightweaver Foundation. She also works at Dragonsteel, so I keep her very busy. But we got a chance to go to 2 different prisons, and Brandon spoke to these inmates, the ones who had been through the program is called Captain Your Story. And the ones who had been through this program came and listened to Brandon speak, and he talked about specifically the hero's journey and kind of his journey as a writer and our journey as humans to figure out who we are and what we want to do and take responsibility for ourselves. And it was really powerful watching these inmates and seeing the hope that they have after doing, and it's not like it's good principles of psychology and of
yeah,
I don't know what the term is, humanity,
right?
But that they're learning through writing. And it was amazing to see the difference in them and hear their stories and see where they've come from. And a lot of them were fans of Brandon. We actually brought copies of The Way of Kings and gave one to each inmate. And it was really, really cool. So that's been a cause that we've been involved with a little bit in different ways, and then had that opportunity to go and do that a couple of months ago.
Yeah, the power of the stories we tell ourselves.
Right.
Whether that's through reading a book, like telling yourself that story, or the stories that we create about who we are. Kind of as you were saying at the beginning of this conversation, you had to kind of change the story you were telling about who you were from being, I used to be a teacher, to saying, I'm currently a business owner. And that flip for these inmates from maybe seeing themselves as a villain or a victim to being able to see themselves as a hero. Like, it's such a powerful shift that can happen when somebody tells you that you can, that kind of give you this little tool. Yeah, that's just so great.
And we'll have more on the Lightweaver Foundation website about the things that we learned. We'll have some blog posts and some interviews, but I was talking to one inmate in particular in the Captain My Story program. They call them residents, not inmates. I was talking with one resident who had been on the street since the age of 3 and was involved in gangs, very heavily involved in gangs. And he looked at me and said, I realized I was living someone else's vision for me. Like that wasn't who I wanted to be. I was living someone else's ideas and I wanted to choose. And I just think that's so powerful. when people figure that out.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think, as you said, there are plenty of direct connections to Brandon's works, that it makes sense why it would be popular with residents, and people who have struggled in life, because so often those things begin at ages when no one is really conscious of what's
Yeah,
going on.
making
If they're on the streets from when they're 3,
Mhm.
the choice, in quotes, to join a gang isn't really much of a choice at all, which, we see all the time with things like the singer populations magically, kind of, forced into a slavery position, Kaladin in a slavery position, and then just always being able to like change the mindset to, I need to take the next step. The next step is the most important one. So it's wonderful to hear that focus specifically of the Lightweaver Foundation.
But you mentioned too that the foundation has been changing as Dragonsteel has been growing. What are some of the changes that either have happened or are upcoming?
Well, we're looking into, right, like I said, we're a private foundation, which limits some of the things we can do, and we're looking into either starting or changing to be a public foundation, which would give us more opportunities. We have to be careful how much we do, and there's lots of different rules and regulations for very
Yeah.
good reasons. But that's what we're looking at currently is how big do we want this to get, and how many other people do we want to involve? It does take a lot. If we get so big, then Brad and I probably can't afford to pay for
Yeah.
all the overhead.
Yeah.
But that might be worth it if we are able to involve more people who are interested. So kind of
And
just looking into that and gathering information.
is that the main kind of determining factor, is like the size of the operation, or are there other factors like, I just don't have any
You mean
experience in
between
this world.
like a private and
The
a
private
public?
and the public, is it like how big the organization is? Is it how much money it's allowed to raise? Kind of just give us a
Uh,
very brief.
It kind of, it's a little bit of each.
Mhm.
A public foundation can work with anyone, basically. Like no one can own a charitable organization. Even the Lightweaver Foundation is, it's a private foundation, but nobody can own it. But a public charity has a little bit more leeway in, how much money. For example, in a private charity, a certain amount of money needs to be donated by the private individuals, and
Mm,
only a certain amount can be donated by people outside.
Got it. Okay.
got it.
So that's part of it. And it's also how much fundraising can you do? What type of fundraising can you do? Are you actually being the ones going out and doing the service itself, taking someone else's money and they're in Ukraine giving things to people? Or are you the one just giving money to other people?
Mhm.
All kinds of different things. But we always want to make sure that we're doing things legally
Of
Yes.
course.
and the way that they're supposed to be done, but also what's our objective and where are we going with it? And do we have the right vehicle for what we want to do? So,
Yeah.
That makes so much sense. And so the kind of 3 main elements that we have talked about a little bit, the international efforts, the more local efforts, and then you have this partnership with Primary Children's Hospital, the School Zone program, and that specifically helps hospitalized children stay connected to their education.
mhm.
Could you just tell us about like what is the Lightweaver Foundation doing for those children who, need to still stay up with their education? And I think we can all guess why education is important to you, but just kind of like inform us a little bit about that facet of the foundation.
The school zone, they recently built a new primary children's hospital closer to where Brandon and I live. There's one in Salt Lake City and now there's one in Lehigh. And we started working with the school zone at the hospital in Salt Lake. But then when they built the new campus, we kind of took over funding the entire school zone for that area. And they have a library. They have a huge library where any kid who is hospitalized, whether they're, long term or whether they're just coming in for the day, can get a book, any book they want, read it, take it home with them. And they have staff members there who are teachers who are, will take a cart around to all of the kids who are not able to get out of bed and bring them books to read. And they have teachers that are trained. So if there are kids that are going to be in the hospital for a long time for whatever reason, they will help the kids with their studies. They'll be a liaison between the kids and their teachers. They will go out and get the kids homework. When the kids go home from the hospital, they kind of help them transition. They do a lot.
What an incredible resource for those kids and their families to have someone like in their corner navigating that aspect of things while there are so many other things going on for that family to be trying to deal with.
Well, and they really do help the parents too, because
Yeah.
if you have a sick child in the hospital, you're not thinking about their education,
Of
but
course
that's
not. Yeah.
a huge deal.
Yeah.
And so the school zone staff are amazing. They're really great. We got a chance to go and do a book drop for them and meet them specifically and see their library, and that was a lot of fun, talking to them and hearing some of their experiences. And we talk about meeting basic needs, but once you have basic needs met, for a lot of us, books are a basic need.
Yes.
And I think that it does a huge service to kids who are sick and dealing with things, to have books, to learn, to escape.
Yeah, I was just listening to a music artist on another podcast talk about arts education and how, teaching someone to read or play an instrument or what have you is the quickest way to improve their quality of life, because
Mhm.
all of a sudden that person can read a book or play, their little instrument in a corner of a room or go to a free day at a museum, and like all of a sudden the amount of joy and fulfillment that has the potential to be in that person's life, just increases incredibly. So, yeah, absolutely. Programs like this, I'm sure they make such a big difference to the kids who are in these situations.
Yeah, it's been really rewarding to work with primary children's and all the things that they are doing. So we were glad the school zone was a good fit for us
Right.
to be able to work with them. So
It makes sense as Dragonsteel is growing that you would also, want to, or at least have the ability to think about expanding the Lightweaver Foundation. While, of course, there are different legal aspects and kind of like you're in charge of understanding those particulars. What is just like the underlying dream that you and Brandon have for the Lightweaver Foundation? What do you imagine it being, even if, let's just take this out of the actual world and just say
No
like,
laws.
yeah, exactly. Just like, what do you and Brandon want to do, and how do you imagine the Lightweaver Foundation accomplishing that?
I mean, yeah, no laws,
Yeah,
no,
yeah.
all power. Everyone in the world has food, water, shelter, safety, and books,
Yeah.
But I think a lot of what we want to do is, like I said, continue to shine a light on organizations that are already doing good things.
Yeah.
Work with them both with our own funds, but also making people aware. And I think that vetting part is really important. Finding causes that are doing really good things, and it's a responsibility too, like it's something we have to be able to make sure we do well. If people are going to follow our example and donate to these things, then we need to make sure we're giving good information. And so that's kind of a daunting idea, but having the resources to be able to do that, to both choose things that we want to donate to, and also say, hey, any of our fans, look at this cool thing that's being done, help them out, and kind of seek out organizations that are already on the ground, established, doing these things. Seems like a better option to us than trying to do it ourselves.
Yeah, no need to, machete down a path that's already been trodden by people who have, expertise and connections in the area, et cetera, et cetera. A lot of times those people know how to do the work. They just need the resources to be able to do the work or do it well.
Right. The resources, and in many cases with charitable organizations, the visibility.
Right. The
Yeah.
spotlight that you provide.
What they're doing, and that's something that I think we can help with. I don't ever want to lose the hands-on part of it, which is why I try to always keep something that we do. And it started out with just our family, but now it's kind of become Dragonsteel employees, because they all want to be involved in Lightweaver Foundation. They just jump right in and help with things. And I want something that people can do hands-on and actually see.
Yeah.
what they're doing, not just, I mean, most organizations, don't get me wrong, they're not going to say no if you offer them money. But I think we need to do the hands-on part and see that our efforts are making a difference to people. So
Yeah, it establishes or helps establish that capital C connection
mhm.
between the people in your immediate vicinity, your family, and the people who are working at Dragonsteel, and the work that is being done. And then there's also a connection to all of the people who are donating, and like, that's the way that they're contributing. I'm curious if there is a, like, what would you say is the best way to support the Lightweaver Foundation? We know that there are some commemorative Christmas ornaments. I think the World Hopper Ball goblets are sold by the
Oh yeah.
Lightweaver Foundation. So like, what is the best way for people to support the Lightweaver Foundation?
I think, participating in our fundraising efforts is always helpful. And one of the things we're trying to do better and do a little more is kind of have some accountability, to go back and to people and say, this is what we did with the money that you
Mm,
gave us. And not just necessarily the name of the organizations, but what did we all accomplish together? And so that's been our thing this year, is to work towards more visibility and, like I said, kind of accountability. And so I would say, whether you're doing it through Lightweaver Foundation or directly to some of the causes that we like, or even, willing to let us help us be aware of other causes that kind of fit our scope. I would just say, people find a way to be involved some way. Whatever, everyone has different stages of their life. Everyone's in different places as far as the resources they have available, but finding some way to be involved in helping our communities to to grow and for people to be better makes a huge difference, I think, to the individuals and to the community. It,
yeah.
it was kind of daunting when I started looking at, okay, what do we here? We have this lump of money. What are we going to do with it? All the places we could go and all the people who need things. It was really kind of overwhelming and
Yeah.
a little bit discouraging, because there's just so much going on in our world. But the nice thing was, being involved in a charitable organization, you kind of get involved in all of the other different philanthropies that are in the community in the area. And that's really cool and powerful, because I give my little bit and someone else gives their little bit, and all of a sudden we're doing something that really seems like it matters. So I think anything anyone can do, whether it's through us, whether it's through other causes, whether it's through, their own community, their own family, finding a way that you can give something that you have to someone who doesn't, I think is really powerful.
For the audience, if they're interested, if they want to donate, we'll put the website link in the show notes. As we
Yeah.
said, there are some like merch items. If you're interested in getting merch in exchange for your donation, you can also just donate directly either to the foundation as a whole, or you can select the specific organization that you want your donation to go to. And then you also recently did an event, like a donation
Yeah.
event at the Compass Gallery, which looked like so much fun. I was very jealous I could not be there.
That's fun.
But
Yeah.
yeah, if you want to talk a little bit about this event that featured some Cosmere cosplayers and artists that was raising money for the foundation.
Yeah, it started out with Howard Lyon and Esther Kandari, who are two local artists that we've worked with pretty closely over the last few years. And they help run a gallery in Provo, which is fairly close to where we live. And the gallery is mostly religious art, kind of a couple of different things, but they wanted to do a yearly sci-fi fantasy art show. And they called it Fantastically Human. And they had, works by a bunch of different artists who put pieces in the show. But they wanted to show off, Howard Lyon painted the original
For
for Trust.
Trust, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We actually gave him that book and said, Howard, you do all the art for this book. And it's gorgeous. It's just amazing. Howard's incredibly talented. But he wanted to borrow the original, which I had to buy from him because I loved it so much. And then they asked if they could borrow a few other pieces that we had in our personal collection. And then it kind of became, well, hey, we want people to come in and see the art pieces in the show, but what if we, what kind of event could we do to contribute to a charity? So it was actually really fun. They had about 10 artists there, and then they had cosplayers dressed as, we had a veil, we had a tress, we had a Kaladin. I think that was all. I don't remember. And several artists painting them live. And people would buy tickets to the event, and the proceeds would go towards charity. And then they also live streamed the event. And it was really fun to watch, because you're getting a bunch of different kinds of art there. You have these cosplayers who in many cases are actors, and they are embodying this character that you've read about and is, part of one of your friends now. And then you're seeing all of these different interpretations of that character growing right as you go. And it was lovely. They had live music, they had some hors d'oeuvres and things, and Brandon and I just got to go around and talk to people and hear their stories, and all the ticket sales came to the Lightweaver Foundation. And then they're actually going to take those paintings and we'll auction them off later and then use those proceeds as well. So it was really fun to be involved with the Compass Gallery and see all the pieces in the show, and then watch how they run an event. They're just incredibly professional and really fun to work with. So
what a cool event.
Yeah, it seemed awesome on the live stream and the social media that, as we were following. Friend Savannah was there as a Vale, and then Cliff, also from the World Hopper Ball, who played Kaladin. Those types of events, those kind of like live in-person events, is that something that the Lightweaver Foundation is looking to repeat in the future?
We'll have to decide. This was a nice one because we didn't have to run the entire thing.
Of course.
We don't have a ton of resources. I mean, we have me and Brandon and Jane, and then whoever wants to be involved from Dragonsteel to volunteer their time. The nice thing is that a business can volunteer their employees' pay. So my Dragonsteel employees can say, I'm going to volunteer for Lightweaver, and Dragonsteel still pays them, and that goes towards charity. So it's kind of a cool thing that businesses can do. But we try to kind of piggyback on cool events that are already happening, like we did with Hopper Ball. And then there's some other partners we have that do events that we have kind of helped with or sponsored or been a part of, rather than creating our own event from scratch. One of the events that we helped with a few months ago is there was a night that was kind of for women involved in charity in our community. It was kind of a pampering night. Lightweaver Foundation helped sponsor some of the giveaways. It was really cool because they had a bunch of businesses owned by women that were there. There was a business of a woman who does permanent jewelry, where you get a bracelet and it's soldered on rather than so it's on all the time kind of thing. And she came, and everyone who was there got a free bracelet, and there was a candle making company, all of these women-owned businesses who were giving their wares to women in the community who've been involved in philanthropy and charity and business leadership. And I got to speak at that, and then Lightweaver helped with the gift bags that everyone got. And that was a really cool thing, kind of supporting the people who support charities.
Yeah.
Which is kind of what we like to do, is maybe we're not out there all the time, on the ground doing the things ourselves, but we can find people who are doing good and give them resources.
Yeah. And I think that's equally powerful, as you were talking about. If the complexity of the organization kind of raises, that can actually be a limiting factor in some ways. And so this is like allowing you to get the best of both worlds, obviously staying a little bit local for some of the efforts, but then as the reach wants to extend, you go to people who are kind of already able to serve in those places and kind of serve in the best way that they know how. So I think that's really cool. As we said, we'll make sure to put the links to the Lightweaver Foundation in the show notes. And I did want to transition a little bit to an upcoming event that is on everybody's mind, of Dragonsteel Nexus. This is one of course, the main draws that has kind of changed over the years. As we were talking about Dragonsteel Company transitioning and growing through the eras, Dragonsteel Nexus is now at a new peak. We had, I say as just someone who attended, like I did anything at all.
We're all involved. That's part of it, is, there would be no convention without attendees. So everybody's part of it.
There were about 8,000 people last year. I think Brandon has recently announced that there's somewhere planned for around 10,000 this year at Dragonsteel Nexus 2025. Could you talk a little bit about that from the planning and logistical angle? Kind of like, what's the ethos of this massive event that you guys are running each December?
It's kind of insane. We have a specific department, our merchandise and events department, the events team. There are other events we do, smaller ones, and our crowdfunding is considered an event because we want it to be immersive and, everyone being part of it. But what they focus on almost the entire year is Dragonsteel Nexus. And there are about 6 people on that team. They all have various things that they do, but they've done a really good job of setting things up. It started out as the release parties for Brandon's books. He was like, when a movie comes out, you have a premiere and there's a big old party, a red carpet, and when books come out, nobody cares. So let's have a big party.
We care, Brandon. We care.
And so do a lot of other people. Yes.
Yeah. Kara Stewart, who is our merchandise and events VP, she is a party animal. She is an extrovert. She loves people. She loves hosting. So she's like, oh yeah, Brandon, you want a party? I will give you a party. And it started out as, having games in line while people were waiting to sign books, and just kind of grew bigger and bigger every year. And then and to be honest, Brandon wasn't super convinced of the validity of this idea from the beginning. But Kara's like, just be patient. Let me show you what this can do. And we found that we'd been to so many conventions. Brandon's been guest of honor at, for years, he would go to at least almost a convention a month as a guest of honor speaker, because that was a way to get people to know who he was. Which was not very fun for me home with little kids.
Yeah.
But it was one of those things you just had to deal with. But we found that there are 2 kinds of conventions. There's the nonprofit kind of community volunteer run convention that started in like the 60s. And there's still a lot of them going on in just local communities. And then you've got the big for-profit San Diego Comic-Con type things. And we decided that we didn't really like either one. We wanted to kind of see if we could be a hybrid, because sometimes the big for-profit cons feel very commercial, and mercenary, and they're there to sell you stuff. And while we like selling stuff too, we don't want that to be the only reason people are at the convention. Some of the little cons are difficult because they don't have their volunteer run, and they don't have a lot of resources. But they have really loyal fans who come every year, and it feels like a family reunion, and they enjoy being together, and we love that aspect of it. So we try to create a convention where people could come, and it was a little more interactive than some of the conventions that you might go to. In most cases, you get a panel discussion every single time. You've got 4 people, 5 people up on a stage, and they talk about stuff and ask questions. And we're like, so what if there's other stuff people can do? What if there's a game? What if there's, a scavenger hunt? What if there's photo ops? What are all of these different things? So the events team came up with some really fun ideas to make it more of a community type event.
Mission accomplished.
Yeah.
So fun. And when I hear people, people being like, oh yeah, Brandon Sanderson, whatever, yeah, has books coming out, but these are my people and I get to come and see them and we get to be together. Like, that makes me happy that people are enjoying that aspect of it.
Yeah, it's always so cool to walk around the convention and see everyone like doing their own con, basically, because there are so many different things to do. You've got the people like us who are like, we want to watch all the panels about lore and just like talk to people about the secrets of the Cosmere. And then there are people who just like play the game the whole time, and that's what they're doing. And you see them, in corners on the floor trading their trading cards. And then there are the people who are just in the game room the whole time, like playing their RPGs. And it's such a great atmosphere. It's so unique. I think you guys nail the balance.
Oh, I hope we can continue to do that. It's one of those things where I'm like, how big can we get and still keep that feel? One of the things we've done is we haven't crammed as many people as we possibly could into the space that we have. We have fire code would let us put more people in there, but that's one of the things I really dislike about the big for-profit cons is you feel like a herd of cattle.
Yeah,
You're
yeah.
Yes.
in there and you can't really stop and look at things. And so we tried to keep it a little bit more loose than that purposely.
Yeah.
But it is hard when we have more people who want to come than we are able to accommodate. And that was last year, that was a tricky thing. We didn't realize how fast the tickets would sell out and how disappointed people would be. So we had to try, we tried to do a different kind of lottery system this year. And I feel like it worked out better, but there's always going to be people that don't get what they want. And that's hard. I want everyone to be happy.
Of course.
Yeah, of course. And I know that another challenge in the past, as Dragonsteel Nexus was growing and kind of like earning its reputation, there were limits from the Salt Palace. This is the convention center where it is put on. But now Brandon said recently that the Salt Palace is like, you guys can have what you want. And so then it's just up to you about kind of like the size and how quickly you grow.
Well, and what the company can like sustainably do, because I think what you were just saying, Emily, speaks to the desire to maintain a good experience for the people who do come to the convention, and sort of balancing that with the knowledge that there's more people who want to come, and like, how do you find the best of both worlds? But you can't just infinitely grow, at least probably at this point, with the size of Dragonsteel, the company.
Well, and we're control freaks too. Like, we don't want to give up control. We want to know what's going on and be able to kind of curate the experience for people. And so we've worked really well in that we have a lot of volunteers, fantastic volunteers. We call them squires.
Yes, the squires and the Dougs, shout out to them.
Squires and the Dougs are amazing. But one of the big controversies in the con world has been unpaid volunteers. And so last year we were able to pay our volunteers. I mean, not what they're worth, but at least something. And that actually made Brandon really happy. That was a concern to him, because sometimes it feels like the volunteers are taken advantage of, and especially if you're a for-profit con, you have nonprofit, people, volunteers who aren't earning anything, that doesn't look so good. But so we were able to do that with our squires, and that was fun. Most of them, I think, would still have come and done it anyway, but at least we were giving a nod to the fact that we were taking in profit for this and sharing it with them, kind of thing. So that was fun.
Yeah, and it's definitely been great to in all of the fan community. So I'm definitely on the House of Doug's Discord server.
Awesome.
And I know that it's an aspect that, as you were saying, these people are passionate. They would be there almost always, or almost certainly.
Some people like prefer to be volunteers. They're like, no, I want to come as a volunteer and like be part of making the magic, basically.
And I think it's just a testament to Dragonsteel as a company of saying, like, this is the right thing to do for this for-profit convention that we are putting on. And so thank you, because I do know that there are conventions out there, including in our home city, that have lots and lots of volunteers that don't get paid for that work. And so it's another testament to Dragonsteel as an organization.
Well, thank you. We're trying.
Yeah, and you're doing a great job. I would love to just go to kind of wrap up here a little bit, but to bring in some of the questions directly from our fans and just things that people wanted to know from you. You and Brandon, I think first in 2023, but then at Dragonsteel Nexus 24 as well, have talked about the Dragonsteel headquarters, or whatever name it might go by in the future. I believe at that time you said that some land had been purchased, and would love to just hear, like, what is the progress on that? What's the overall kind of goal that you have for this headquarters in the future?
Yeah, the overall goal is to eventually have a place that is part headquarters for our business, part general interest community bookstore, and part event venue. And it kind of evolved into this. Part of it is, we have a space that we're leasing, and if we are able to have work from a space that we own, then it's, a lot better for us.
Yeah.
And so looking into that and then thinking, what do we want this space to be like? And do we want it just to be an office building? And kind of coming up with the idea of finding other revenue streams, that don't depend on Brandon and his writing. And if we're a landlord and have tenants, then that's theoretically a source of income. But then thinking, wouldn't it be cool if we had tenants that fit and matched with our vision and what we're trying to do? And so that's kind of what we're hoping is eventually we'll have our building and then other smaller buildings that are businesses that kind of share our vision, and kind of a classy nerd mecca, honestly.
I love it. I live for that.
Yeah, we're going to be making that pilgrimage quite often. Is there any timeline at this point, or is it just in the development stage?
It's just in the development stage. We came up with what we wanted to do, realized how much what we wanted to do would cost.
Mm-hmm.
We're like, okay, we got to look at some funding issues and kind of put things on pause because we don't want to go in over our heads and sink our company.
Yeah.
But we also don't want to back down on this dream now. Like now that I've seen what we could do, I don't want to do something smaller. So we're just kind of put the plans on pause and looking at different possibilities and what we could do with it. Part of the reason for this too is that fans like to come and see things and be part of things. And, back in the day, it wasn't a big deal if they all came to our house, but now
Yeah.
that doesn't work so well.
Yes. Do not go to their house ever.
Same thing with the Dragonsteel offices.
Yeah.
And so, if we had a place where, yeah, it's a bookstore, but there's a case on the wall that shows Brandon's first manuscript with all of the editors, comments on it, the Elantris manuscript, or, things like that. Or we could hang up all of our original art and people could see it, and fun things like that we think would be fun, kind of create a destination. And we wouldn't want to make it so specific that non-Cosmere fans wouldn't want to be there. So it's, like I said, it's a classy, nerd mecca. It's a, hey, that looks really cool. I want to go there, even if I've never read Brandon Sanderson. But, once you get in, then
of course. Yeah.
Then we'll introduce you to the cult.
So it was really fun brainstorming ideas about how to make it subtly Sanderson themed, but not off-putting to other people, and also that community kind of feel.
Definitely. And one of our patrons, Brian, just asked, is the Dragonsteel headquarters, this kind of like nerd mecca, as well as the multiple different things that Dragonsteel kind of does outside of just Brandon writing books, is that meant to kind of like fill the gaps, as Brandon is a normal human being and can't just write all the time? I know he seems to have machine-like production levels, but like his stories are on kind of like a wave, and we know that like Stormlight 5 just released and there's not going to be another one of those for a while. And so like, is that where you see Dragonsteel as a company kind of filling in some of those gap periods?
Yeah, it is exactly that. It's kind of funny though, honestly. Brandon's not the slow point. Like he writes fast enough that we could do only his stuff and be just fine. But he's one of the things that concerns him the most is he's like, what if something happens to me and I'm not writing? And so he's like, we need to find a way that the company can do something that doesn't rely just on his writing. I think it would be helpful for him also Brandon and I are turning 50 this year, like we're not getting any younger. And so having a little bit less pressure on him as far as I got to get this book finished or no one will have anything to eat next year, know? So trying to figure out what is the best way to use the resources and kind of the infrastructure that we've created to still accomplish our goals, but that doesn't directly require Brandon and his writing. And we're still experimenting. We've tried several different things and kind of figuring out, at this point, we're kind of like throwing a bunch of noodles at the wall and seeing what sticks. But the hope is eventually we can still do what we love and accomplish our goals. Our values in our company are community and compassion and creation. And I specifically say creation, not creativity, because I feel like creativity implies being the first or the most unique of something. And I feel like humans are creators and we are happy when we create. And if something that we do inspires, 70 billion people to do the exact same thing, great.
Yeah.
We've had that experience. So if we can still keep those values and give Brandon a bit of a break and still have enough work for everyone to do, then that's what we're hoping we can do. So part of it is, I think part of the reason we do so many different things is that we get bored with just one. But we've kind of decided we have to narrow it to so that we do books, do experiences, and then our third one is, how do we expand the IP in some way?
Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
Theoretically, Hollywood will be involved at some point in some way, but
we're all going to keep praying.
Yeah.
Hollywood's on fire at the moment, so
Yeah.
I think there are quite a few Yumis and painters out there who are very happy with the noodles that you are throwing out, and we are among them. Just happy to keep on taking what Dragonsteel is making, and kind of that creation is just such a key aspect, because it's, as we've talked about previously with the cast of the World Hopper Ball, there's kind of this just ability to co-create experiences.
Mhm.
And I know this is like a very silly thing for someone who is mainly just like intaking this stuff.
Oh, you guys are creators too. Absolutely.
We make a very small aspect of things, and Brandon is, putting out the books and the stories. Dragonsteel as a company is putting out these experiences, as well as expanding those stories and the reach of those stories. But it does have such a powerful component when you get to experience a group of people enjoying something and being part of something together. And that's definitely what we felt at Dragonsteel Nexus.
Yeah, I think you're speaking to what I wanted to say as well, which is I think your company values are really evident. Like, I didn't know what your company values were, but as soon as you said them, it was like, oh yeah, absolutely. Like, those come through very clearly, that the focus is on community and compassion and creation. And because of your dedication to those things, and because you're able to really let it come out into the world, it has a huge impact on all of us little fans out here, and has really created like such a beautiful community of people who are all so compassionate, and it's such a welcoming, lovely place to be, whether that place is on the internet or on a podcast or in person at some kind of event or book club, etc. So I just wanted to say, great job, you're doing it. And thank you.
Yes, thank you.
You don't know how much that means to me to hear that, because it's important to us. We specifically think about, how is what we're doing inspiring other people to experience these values in some way. And I love the synergy of one person doing something, another person doing something, but then they put it together and it's bigger than either of them could do on their own. That's a really cool thing. And
it absolutely is. And I think that I want to just understand, what are the next steps for Dragonsteel as a company when it comes to these events? We know we talked a little bit about the international efforts that you had recently. Brandon mentioned last year that maybe there's some more nexuses that are being planned, or at least a dream of that. Is that something that is closer to a dream, or is that closer to a reality at this point?
Yeah, those are definitely some of the noodles we've flung at the wall, and we're waiting to see what sticks and what, slides down.
Mm-hmm.
But definitely figuring out a way to create an event that more people can be part of, but still has the same feel and accomplishes the same goals. And whether that involves, multiple events, multiple sessions, different locations, we're still kind of doing some research and figuring out how to make that happen. But it was really gratifying to see the response of the fans in Spain, and how excited they were to have us there. Not just Brandon, but all of us.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had somebody ask me to write my signature on his arm with a Sharpie, and then he went and got it tattooed. And I was like, whoa, that's happened to Brandon before, but never to me. And I was like, are you sure you want my name on your arm?
A new level of fame, Emily.
it was kind of insane.
Yeah.
But that was fun. And I love the idea that people are creating their own communities, and how we can support them and inspire them at least, but can we do it in other ways too? Kind of trying to figure out the best way. Hey, if anyone has any good suggestions, We are definitely open to people's opinions and suggestions, because I mean, it's for you guys. It's like, that's why we do this, you know?
Yeah.
Any good to create all these things and then just sit on them.
Well, we appreciate all the efforts and echo exactly what Brooke said. The Cosmere, the works of Brandon, but also like more so the Nexus and the friendships that we've made there are very meaningful to our life, and just like the starting with the ideals that Brandon has, the ideals that Dragonsteel as a company has. It's just all kind of like creating a really positive feedback loop that we see all the time. And we know that's starting with both you and Brandon. So thank you for everything that you do. Is there anything that we didn't talk about that you feel is really important, or kind of some last minute thoughts that you had?
I think you guys covered it all. You're very thorough. Good questions too.
That's wonderful to hear. We might have just done a little bit of
Yeah,
preparation.
I could tell. And it's also very obvious that you've done this because a time or two.
Don't threaten me with some outline notes.
One of those things that you make it look easy, but I know it's not, to set all of this up and research beforehand and then just be so genuine and pleasant to talk with. So I really appreciate you having me on.
Oh, thanks, Emily.
As we in the podcast, we say the first ideal. We would love if you join us. Again, thank you very much, Emily, for being here. And Brooke, can you take us away?
Until next time, life before death.
Strength before weakness.
Journey before destination.